Hi everyone. In this video, I wanted to take a look at some of the key moments in the text that we're reading this week, Plato's Crito. Now, the first moment we're looking at is this exchange, the initial exchange between Crito and Socrates. And it's important to remember that Crito is one of Socrates' best friends. And so what he's trying to do in this passage is essentially give him bunches of reasons why he should break out of jail. Now, when we look at a complicated text like this one of the things I like to do is take each reason by itself and see whether my conclusion will follow from that reason alone. Now, in this text, Crito is giving us a whole bunch of reasons. So I thought we would take a look at this side passage here. Besides Socrates, I do not think that what you were doing is just. To give up your life when you can save it, and to hasten your fate as your enemies would hasten it, and indeed have hastened it in their wish to destroy you. Moreover, I think you're betraying your sons by going away and leaving them, when you could bring them up and educate them. You thus show no concern what their fate may be. So take the passage by itself and ask, just because you're giving your enemies what they want, does it follow that it's okay to break out of jail? And we would make the same point about, right, you're abandoning your sons. Does that mean, therefore, it's okay for you to break out of jail? Right, so this is a nice technique. You take each line one by one, right, and then ask whether it gives you the conclusion that you want. Now, as we read, we want to read critically. And that means that oftentimes Plato will get his interlocutors, the people he's talking to agree to things. And it's important for us, whenever Socrates is asking questions like this, it's important for us to see if we can decide for ourselves whether we agree or not. Okay, and we get some of that agreement right here in this passage, moving on a little bit ahead. Socrates says, do we say that one must never in any way do wrong willingly, or must one do wrong in one way and not in another? Skipping down a little bit, he says, nor must one, when wronged, inflict wrong in return. Socrates gets Crito to agree to one more thing. He asks him, when one has come to an agreement that is just with someone, should one fulfill it or cheat on it? Crito agrees one should fulfill it. Socrates says, see what follows from this. If we leave here without the city's permission, are we harming people whom we should least do harm to? And are we sticking to a just agreement or not? Crito responds, I cannot answer your question, Socrates. I do not know. Socrates has gotten Crito to agree to three things very quickly. First, that we must never do wrong to another person. Second, because of that, we must never return wrong for wrong. So that would rule out the eye for an eye principle. But finally, that if we have an agreement with someone, we should fulfill it. Imagine a case for a moment. Let's suppose that you agree to help a friend. Let's say you agree to help them, pick them up from work. The question now would be, well, later, maybe you don't feel like it. Would it be wrong if you decided not to do it? And I think what Socrates is saying here is that if you make an agreement with someone, and it's a just agreement, you should fulfill it. Now this brings us to the last question, though, and this turns out to be really important. The last question is, if Socrates breaks out of jail, is he in any way breaking an agreement that he made with the city? And if he does that, is he harming anybody? And you might even put it this way, is he harming the city? Finally, I wanted to look at one last text. This text occurs later when the laws of the city come back to interrogate Socrates. And there are several points made here, but I think this text does a nice job of capturing it. The city says, reflect now, Socrates, the laws might say, that if what we say is true, you are not treating us rightly by planning to do what you are planning. We have given you birth, nurtured you, educated you. We have given you all and all other citizens a share of all the good things we could. Even so, by giving every Athenian the opportunity, once arrived at voting age and having observed the affairs of the city and us the laws, we proclaim that if we do not please him, he can take his possessions and go wherever he pleases. Not one of our laws raises any obstacle or forbids him if he's not satisfied with us or the city. If one of you wants to go and live in a city or a colony or wants to go anywhere else and keep his property, We say, however, that whoever of you remains, when he sees how we conduct our trials and manage the city in other ways, has in fact come to an agreement with us to obey our instructions. There are two main points to focus on here. First, there is an analogy between the city and your parents. The city is like your parents because it made it possible for you to exist. You would not exist without the city. This seems to imply that you owe the city something in return. The second point is that the city has presented us with three options. First, we can attempt to persuade the city that its commands are unjust and that it should do better. Second, we can obey its commands. Or third, we can take our possessions and leave the city altogether. I think the big question is whether these options alone are enough. For example, do you need a concept of civil disobedience? Plato's dialogue, Crito, gives us a lot to think about, especially philosophically. But I think the dialogue also shows us that it's important to read critically. Right? As we read, we don't want to just accept what others say. We want to really think about it for ourselves, examine it, see whether we think it's true. In fact, something I often tell students in class is that the main takeaway is don't be a Crito. Crito, after all, is Socrates' best friend, but he actually gives up in the second half of the dialogue. He stops asking questions. And I think that's something Plato would not want us to do. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.